Hello and welcome everybody to the first lesson for the philosophy of time. Now I'm very excited to be bringing you a series of lessons on the philosophy of time because it is a very interesting, quite mind-meltingly complicated topic for philosophy, which is the kind of philosophy that I absolutely love to do. So let's just think about some of the questions that we're going to ask when we think about the philosophy of time. Well, the first question is, what actually is time itself? To what extent can we come up with a coherent theory of time that is not only philosophically interesting, not only is it philosophically coherent, but we also have to marry the ideas of the philosophy of time with the physics of time. So we know that time is obviously something that is very important for the purposes of a number of very key fundamental theories of physics. For example, both special and general relativity have to account for the concept of time as a dimension of space and time, like the idea of space-time. So we have to be coherent from a scientific perspective, but we also have to be coherent from a metaphysical perspective as well. Then we have to think about the question about the existence of time. Is time actually real, or is time actually an illusion? Now, there are actually some very interesting arguments to suggest that time may in fact be just an illusion, that it is not something that is necessarily real, it is just something that exists within the conscious experience of other people. So that's a question that we have to ask. Why is there time rather than no time? Another question that's very interesting. You might think that this actually derives from other questions that we can think about specifically within the philosophy of religion. So a very key common theological argument for the existence of some kind of deity is that to ask the question, why is there something rather than nothing? And this is very similar in that kind of vein. Why is there time rather than there's no time? What is it that means that time is something that is necessary for the existence of reality and the existence of the universe? Does time flow? Does it exist as discrete individual chunks that go from one to the next? How can we represent the flow of time and the passage of time? Then we're going to ask questions relating to ontology of time, specifically ontology relating to specific aspects of time and different tenses of time. So, for example, does the past exist? Does the present exist? Does the future exist? Which of these is the case? And there are different theories that we can attach to each of them. So, presentism, eternalism, the moving spotlight theory, growing spotlight theory, and even a shrinking spotlight theory. All of these are different ideas relating to the ontology of the past, present, and the future. These are all questions that relate to the philosophy of time, which is why the philosophy of time is one of the most substantive areas of metaphysics that we like to engage in and we like to construct. And it does also lend itself to a number of different crossovers with other topics relating to metaphysics as well. So the concept of time is related quite significantly with the idea of causation within metaphysics, with the idea of persistence in metaphysics, even with the idea of modality and free will within metaphysics and fatalism as well. So again, but all of these things are all interrelated within metaphysics more broadly. And so this is why time is arguably, in my opinion, it is the most philosophically interesting areas of metaphysics, but I will be a bit more candid with my claims. I will say that it is one of the most interesting, philosophically interesting areas of metaphysics. So this series of lessons is going to be an advanced survey of the philosophy of time. So it's going to be a good 10 to 20, maybe even 30 lessons specifically focusing on all of these different aspects within the philosophy of time. So as you can imagine, because that's quite a lot of content, we're going to be covering quite advanced topics. So this is actually an area of quite advanced metaphysics for the purposes of philosophy. But it is not the case that this is going to require any kind of pre-understanding of philosophy or of metaphysics, although obviously that will always help. But it's just going to be a very detailed survey of some of the basic principles and some of the more complicated principles relating to the philosophy of time. According to physicist Albert Einstein, he's described time as something that a clock measures. Now, while this is quite a quippy response to a deeply philosophically interesting topic, and it is quite a quippy response given the fact that Albert Einstein is somebody who probably understood what time was from a physics perspective more than anybody else on planet Earth, given the fact he developed both general and special relativity, it does give us some indication as to the importance of time when it comes to our day-to-day lives. We describe time using language. We can't essentially have a language without the existence of time as encoded within that language. We use time using technology. There is time when we have watches, we have time on our phones. We have an internal conscious experience of time. We feel the passage of time consciously. We might not be an accurate experience of a passage of time. Sometimes you might think that that time is going a lot slower than it actually is in reality, or maybe going a lot faster. The common phrase "time flies when you're having fun." Again, all of these different things really relate to both the language that we use to communicate ideas require the existence of time within it, and we also have internal conscious experiences of time, which are very important, as well as seemingly external perceptions of time. We see things relating to the ways in which the day goes from day to night, and how this is an external perception of time, and how our body actually has its own circadian rhythm and its own clock within its own system to maintain the passage of time and to sort of maintain itself during the passage of time. All of these things are incredibly important and incredibly interesting topics. So someone who studies the philosophy of time, as I mentioned at the start of this lesson, wants to build a defensible philosophical theory of time. They want a theory that can explain most of the difficult questions relating to what time is, as well as what time is not. So, for example, when we explore the ontology of time, we're going to ask whether or not the past exists, whether or not the present exists, and whether or not the future exists. And then within that sense, we can come up with a number of different external theories. We can talk about presentism being the idea that only the present exists, and the concept is that time will go from non-existence as it is in the future, and then it will go and flow into existence as we enter into the present, and then it will immediately be removed from existence as it goes into the past. That's the idea of what presentism refers to. When we explore the flow of time, we're going to actually examine some of McTaggart's arguments relating to time, which is the A theory of time and the B theory of time. The idea that things within A theory is the idea that essentially things are going from future to the present, then to the past, and that's how time flows. Whereas B theory relates to ideas relating to events within time that are existing in time in relation to other events that are in time. Again, if you think that these are a bit too complicated, we will go through all of these as we go on. So let's think about the scope of this series. What this series of lessons is actually going to teach us. We're going to take, like I said, an advanced survey to the philosophy and metaphysics of time. We're going to experience and examine different kinds of time. So what the difference between the physical concept of time, the psychological concept of time, and the biological concept of time. We're going to explore the nature of ontology, relating to presentism, eternalism, growing block theory, shrinking block theory, moving spotlight theory, all of these different ideas that you may or may not have come into contact with already. We covered these very briefly when we discussed time in our Introduction to Metaphysics series. We're going to talk about McTaggart's A theory and B theory of time. We're going to talk about whether or not time has a direction, whether or not it has to have a direction, and we can actually draw from some quite advanced general relativity and advanced physics to come up with them kind of conclusions. Does the existence and the flow of time require some kind of change? Does it require that change has to take place for time to flow? Does time even exist at all? And then we'll also talk about other things relating to some things within the more technical aspects of philosophy. So we will talk about temporal logic. We'll talk about the advanced concepts relating to the mind and the way in which the philosophy of time relates to the philosophy of mind. And then we will cover some basic preliminary, or at least some final questions on the philosophy of time at the end as well.